It was a quiet Thursday evening, the kind where the world outside seemed to slow down just enough to let you catch your breath. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of creamy Alfredo sauce, the rich aroma filling the air. The radio played softly in the background, some indie band crooning about love and loss, but I wasn't really paying attention. Cooking had always been my way of unwinding, and tonight I needed it more than ever. Work had been a grind, and the tension between Clara and me had been simmering for weeks, though neither of us had dared to address it. When my phone buzzed on the counter, I almost ignored it. But then I saw Liam's name flash across the screen. Liam wasn't the type to call unless it was important. We'd been friends since college, and over the years, he'd become the kind of person who could read me like a book. If he was calling, it wasn't just to shoot the breeze. I picked up the phone, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "Hey, Liam. What's up?" There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear him exhale slowly, as if he were weighing his words. "Hey, Alex, you got a minute?" Something about his tone made my stomach twist. "Yeah, of course. What's going on?" Another beat of silence. Then finally he spoke. "Listen, man, I saw Clara today. She was with some guy. They didn't look like they were just friends, if you know what I mean." The wooden spoon slipped from my hand, clattering against the edge of the pot. I stared at the sauce, now bubbling furiously, as if it could distract me from the words I'd just heard. "What do you mean? Where?" "At that new bistro downtown," Liam said, his voice low and careful. I wasn't going to say anything, but Alex, they were holding hands. My chest tightened, and I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Clara was supposed to be at a work meeting. She told me as much that morning, kissing me on the cheek before heading out the door. "Maybe it's nothing," I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. "Maybe it's a client or something." "I hope so, man," Liam replied softly. "But I thought you should know." The call ended, and I stood there, staring at the pot of sauce as it bubbled quietly. The steam fogged up the kitchen window, but my mind was far from dinner. My thoughts raced, trying to piece together what Liam had told me. Clara had been acting differently lately, more distant, more distracted. I chalked it up to stress, but now I wasn't so sure. Later that night, I decided to bring it up with her. She was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. She looked so at ease, so unbothered, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself that Liam had been mistaken. Almost. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone casual as I sat down beside her. "How was work today?" She didn't look up. "Busy as usual." "Why?" I hesitated, my fingers drumming nervously on the arm of the couch. "Did you go anywhere after? Like, grab a coffee or something?" Her eyes flicked up at me, narrowing slightly. "No, I came straight home." "Why?" Her answer came a little too quickly, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. "No reason," I said, forcing a smile. "Just wondering." She shrugged and went back to her phone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Over the next few days, Clara seemed even more distant. She left for work earlier than usual, came home later, and spent more time on her phone than ever before. One evening, as she sat beside me scrolling through Instagram, I couldn't take it anymore. "Clara," I said, my voice steady but firm. "What's going on with you?" She looked up, her expression guarded. "What do you mean? You've been distant lately. Is there something you're not telling me?" She sighed, putting her phone down. "Alex, you're being paranoid. I'm just stressed with work." "Stressed with work, huh?" I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "So, stressed you're holding hands with someone else?" Her face paled, and for a moment, she looked like she'd been caught in a lie. But then she recovered, her voice sharp and defensive. "What are you talking about?" "Liam saw you," I said bluntly. "Downtown. With some guy." Clara's lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she said, "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" I asked, my voice rising. "Because right now, I don't know what to believe." She stood up, crossing her arms. "Alex, I don't have to defend myself against some random accusation. Liam probably saw someone else." But the way her eyes darted to the side, the way her voice wavered just enough to betray her, told me everything I needed to know. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The days that followed Liam's call were a blur. I tried to push the conversation with Clara to the back of my mind, to convince myself that I was overreacting. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing faster than I could control. Every little thing Clara did seemed to feed it. The way she'd suddenly start texting more often, the way she'd turn her phone screen away from me, the way she'd come home late with vague excuses about work running over. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I couldn't take it anymore. Clara was scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen, and I felt a surge of frustration. "Clara," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "can you put the phone down for 5 minutes?" She glanced at me, her expression a mix of surprise and irritation. "What's your problem, Alex?" "I'm just checking something. You're always on your phone lately," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "It's like you're not even here." She sighed, putting the phone down but not without rolling her eyes. "Fine, happy now?" I didn't respond. The movie played on, but I wasn't paying attention. My mind was racing, replaying the conversation with Liam, the way Clara had reacted when I confronted her. I wanted to believe her, to trust her, but the doubt was like a splinter I couldn't remove. The next morning, Clara left for work early, as usual. I stood at the window, watching her car pull out of the driveway, and for the first time, I felt a pang of suspicion so strong it made my chest ache. I grabbed my keys and followed her. It wasn't something I'd planned. In fact, I felt a little ridiculous as I trailed her car through the morning traffic. But I needed to know. I needed to see for myself where she was going, who she was meeting. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I kept a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. Clara didn't go to her office. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe downtown, the same bistro Liam had mentioned. I parked a few spaces away, my stomach churning as I watched her get out of the car and walk inside. Through the window, I could see her sitting down at a table across from a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident smile, and the way he leaned across the table to talk to her made my blood boil. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Were they just friends? Colleagues? Or was it something more? I wanted to march in there and demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear of what I might find out, fear of what it would mean for us. Eventually, I drove home, my hands trembling on the wheel. I felt like a stranger in my own life, like everything I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers. When Clara came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of coffee I hadn't touched. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I looked up at her, my heart heavy. "Where were you today?" She froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "At work like always." "Why?" "I followed you," I said bluntly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You went to that bistro downtown. Who was the guy you were meeting?" Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like she'd been caught in a lie. But then she recovered, her voice sharp and defensive. "Are you serious, Alex? You followed me? That's insane." "Is it?" I shot back, standing up. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me. So tell me, Clara, who was he?" She crossed her arms, her eyes flashing with anger. "He's a colleague, okay? We were working on a project together. Is that what you wanted to hear? Or are you going to keep accusing me of something I didn't do?" I stared at her, trying to read her expression, but she was a closed book. "If it's just work, then why didn't you tell me? Why all the secrecy?" "Because I knew you'd react like this," she snapped. "You've been paranoid ever since Liam put that stupid idea in your head. I'm tired of it, Alex. I'm tired of you not trusting me." Her words stung, but they didn't erase the doubt gnawing at me. If there's nothing to hide, then why does it feel like you're hiding something? She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her bag and stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to believe her, to trust her, but the cracks in our relationship were growing wider by the day, and I didn't know how to fix them. The days after the argument with Clara were tense and silent. We moved around each other like strangers, avoiding eye contact and speaking only when necessary. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty, a shell of what it used to be. I tried to focus on work, on anything that would distract me from the growing pit of dread in my stomach, but it was no use. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. Who was the man at the bistro? Why was Clara being so secretive? And why did it feel like our relationship was unraveling before my eyes? One evening, after another silent dinner, Clara announced she was going out. "Work thing," she said curtly, grabbing her coat from the hook by the door. "Don't wait up." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As soon as she left, I felt a surge of frustration and desperation. I couldn't keep living like this, not knowing, not trusting. I needed answers, even if they were answers I didn't want to hear. I waited a few minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed her. This time, I wasn't subtle. I didn't care if she saw me. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Clara didn't go to a work event. She drove to a part of town I didn't recognize, pulling into the parking lot of a sleek, modern apartment building. My heart sank as I watched her get out of the car and walk inside, her steps quick and purposeful. I parked a few spaces away, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. Should I go in? Should I confront her? Or should I just drive away and pretend I hadn't seen anything? Before I could decide, I saw her again. This time, walking out of the building with the same man from the bistro. He had his arm around her shoulders, and they were laughing, their heads close together. Something inside me snapped. I got out of the car and crossed the parking lot, my heart pounding in my chest. "Clara!" I called, my voice sharp and loud enough to make her freeze. She turned, her eyes wide with shock. "Alex? What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Who is this? And don't tell me he's a colleague." The man stepped forward, his expression calm but wary. "Hey man, let's not make a scene. Stay out of this," I snapped, cutting him off. I turned back to Clara, my chest heaving. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" Clara's face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. "Alex, I didn't mean for this to happen." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You didn't mean to cheat on me? To lie to me for months? What the hell, Clara?" She flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. "I was confused, okay? I wasn't happy, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I needed someone who understood me. And him." I gestured to the man, who was now standing awkwardly a few feet away. "He understands you? Is that why you've been sneaking around behind my back?" Clara didn't answer. She just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. But I didn't feel sympathy. I felt anger, betrayal, and a deep, aching sadness. "I can't do this," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. We're done, Clara. I'm done." Her eyes widened, and she took a step toward me. "Alex, wait." But I was already walking away, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I might have broken down, and I couldn't let that happen. Not here. Not now. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the wheel. The house felt even emptier when I walked in, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. I sank onto the couch, staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. My marriage was over. The woman I'd loved, the life we'd built together, it was all gone. But even as the pain washed over me, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't have kept living in the dark. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The days after the confrontation with Clara felt like walking through a fog. Time blurred together, and I moved through the motions of life like a ghost. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a museum of memories I couldn't escape. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall reminded me of her, of us. The life we built together was gone, and I was left standing in the ruins, unsure of where to even begin. I didn't sleep that first night. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, my mind replaying the scene in the parking lot over and over. Clara's face, pale and guilty. The man she'd been with standing there awkwardly, as if he hadn't just helped destroy my marriage. The way she'd said, "I didn't mean for this to happen," like it was some kind of excuse. I wanted to scream, to break something, to do anything to release the anger and pain boiling inside me. But I didn't. I just sat there numb. Clara didn't come home that night. I didn't know where she went, and I told myself I didn't care. But deep down, a small, stubborn part of me still worried about her. It was stupid, and I hated myself for it. She'd made her choices, and now I had to live with the consequences. The next morning, I called Liam. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't sugarcoat things or try to fix everything with empty platitudes. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Alex, you okay?" "No," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm not okay. I found out the truth about Clara." There was a long pause on the other end. "I'm sorry, Ma. I really am. What happened?" I told him everything. The confrontation in the parking lot, Clara's admission, the way my world had shattered in an instant. Liam listened without interrupting, and when I was done, he let out a low whistle. "Damn, Alex. That's rough. I don't even know what to say." "Yeah," I said, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know what to do, Liam. I feel like I'm drowning." "First thing you need to do is take care of yourself," he said firmly. "You can't let this destroy you. You're stronger than that." I wanted to believe him, but it was hard to see a way forward when everything felt so broken. Still, I knew he was right. I couldn't just sit around and wallow in self-pity. I had to take control of the situation, even if it hurt. Later that day, I called a lawyer. I didn't know much about divorce, but I knew I needed to protect myself. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah, listened to my story and gave me a grim but reassuring smile. "We'll get through this," she said. "It's going to be tough, but you'll come out the other side." I hope she was right. In the meantime, I started packing my things. I couldn't stay in the house anymore. It was too painful, too full of memories. I found a small apartment downtown and signed a lease without even looking at it. It didn't matter where I lived. Nothing mattered right now, except getting through each day. The process of moving was surreal. I packed up my clothes, my books, the few personal items that felt like mine and not ours. I left behind the photos, the furniture, the life we'd built together. It felt like shedding a skin, painful but necessary. When I walked out of the house for the last time, I didn't look back. I couldn't. Clara called me a few days later. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up the phone. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. "Alex, can we talk?" I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she'd hurt me. But another part of me just felt tired. "What do you want, Clara?" She sighed, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice flat. "You hurt me more than anyone ever has." "I know," she whispered, "and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But Alex, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I was just lost." Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. "It's too late, Clara. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I've already filed for divorce." There was a long silence on the other end. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I understand. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." I didn't respond. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, and I didn't want to make promises I couldn't keep. Instead, I hung up the phone and sat there, staring at the wall, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. But even in the midst of the pain, there was a small glimmer of hope. I was starting to rebuild my life, piece by piece. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but it was something. I started going to therapy, something I'd never considered before. Talking to someone about the betrayal, the anger, the grief helped more than I expected. It didn't fix everything, but it gave me a way to process what had happened. I also reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from over the years. Liam was a constant presence, dragging me out for drinks or just sitting with me in silence when I needed it. Slowly, I began to remember who I was outside of my relationship with Clara. I'd spent so long defining myself as part of a couple that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be me. The divorce process was long and messy, but eventually it was finalized. Clara didn't fight me on anything. She didn't try to cling to the house or our shared possessions. Maybe she felt too guilty, or maybe she just wanted to move on as much as I did. Either way, it was over. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, I realized something. I was going to be okay. Not right away and not without scars, but I would survive this. The pain was still there, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. It was just there, a part of me, but not the whole of me. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. And that was enough. Months had passed since the divorce was finalized, and life had settled into a new rhythm. The raw, jagged edges of the pain had softened, though the scars remained. I was learning to live with them, to carry them without letting them define me. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. My apartment, once a stark and unfamiliar space, had started to feel like home. I'd hung up a few photos, not of Clara and me, but of friends, family, and places I'd visited. The walls were no longer bare, and neither was my life. I'd taken up cooking again, experimenting with recipes I'd always wanted to try, but never had the time for. The kitchen, once a place of tension and silence, was now filled with the comforting smells of spices and herbs. Therapy had become a regular part of my routine. At first, I'd been skeptical, unsure if talking about my feelings would actually help. But over time, I began to see the value in it. My therapist, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patel, had helped me unpack the layers of anger, betrayal, and grief I'd been carrying. She didn't offer easy answers, but she gave me the tools to start healing. "You're not the same person you were before this happened," she said during one session. "And that's okay. You don't have to be. What matters is who you choose to become now." Her words stuck with me. I didn't want to be the bitter, broken man I'd been in the aftermath of the divorce. I wanted to be someone who could find joy again, who could trust again, even if it took time. One Saturday morning, Liam showed up at my door with a duffel bag and a grin. "Get dressed," he said. "We're going on a road trip." I raised an eyebrow. "A road trip? Where?" "Does it matter?" he replied, tossing the bag at me. "Pack some clothes and let's go. You've been cooped up in this apartment for too long." I hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. Why not? I've been stuck in my own head for months, and a change of scenery sounded like exactly what I needed. We ended up driving to a small lakeside town a few hours away. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that wakes you up and makes you feel alive. We spent the weekend hiking, fishing, and sitting by the fire at night talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. Not the man who'd been betrayed, not the man who'd lost everything, but just Alex. On the drive back, Liam glanced over at me. "You're doing better, you know." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good," he said. "Because you deserve to be happy, man. Don't let what happened with Clara take that away from you." His words stayed with me long after we got back. I realized he was right. I did deserve to be happy. And while I couldn't change the past, I could choose how I moved forward. A few weeks later, I ran into Clara. It was unexpected. I was at a coffee shop downtown, and she walked in with a friend. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us knew what to do. Then she approached me, her expression cautious. "Hi, Alex," she said softly. "How are you?" I took a deep breath, surprised by how calm I felt. "I'm okay. How about you?" She nodded, her eyes searching mine. "I'm getting there. Listen, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I know I hurt you, and I'll always regret that." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't feel anger anymore. Just sadness, for both of us. "I know you're sorry," I said. "And I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because I don't want to carry that anger anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "Thank you. That means a lot." We didn't say much after that. She went back to her friend, and I finished my coffee, feeling a strange sense of closure. Forgiving her didn't erase what had happened, but it freed me from the weight of holding on to it. As I walked out of the coffee shop, the sun was shining, and the air smelled like spring. I felt lighter, like I'd finally let go of something I'd been carrying for too long. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I didn't know what was next, but I was ready to find out.